Hello all, and welcome to another episode of the Market Pulse presented by Smart Touch. I am your host, Aaron Fichera, and today we have a special guest with us. We have Paul Benzane and Bob Swainhart from Constellation Home Builder Systems. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
So for those that are listening, Constellation is one of the largest providers of technology and solutions for home builders across North America, originally starting in Canada. And your guys' footprint has just massively grown since the inception in, I believe, 2004.
That's correct. Yep.
But before we kind of dive into the larger picture and some of the exciting things you guys are working on, especially some of the data that's coming out, I always like to give our guests an introduction. Tell us about yourself. Bob, how'd you get in the industry?
Sure. I'm Bob Swainhart. I'm currently the Vice President of the Enterprise Solutions Group at Constellation Home Builder Systems. I came into the industry in 1999, and my background was in franchising. I worked for the company, the parent company that franchised Played Against Sports, and was working for home building franchise company that was going to, basically change the way small builders were able to market themselves. One of the things that we learned was if we could close homes faster, we would be able to collect our royalties quicker. And so we...
It's a good system.
Yeah, we built a technology that helped builders schedule their homes. And so if we could get all of our franchisees to build a home in 90 days instead of 110 or 120, we'd get our money quicker. We went to the International Builder Show in January of 2000, and several builders said, we don't need all that franchise nonsense, but we really like that scheduling technology. And so 90 days later, we were a pure technology play, got out of the franchising business essentially, and that company is now known as Hyphen Solutions. So I literally started there when they had 0 customers on what is now known as BuildPro. And I was there for quite a while, but it was a very different time, most employees at a home builder didn't even have a corporate email address. And they weren't even touching technology.
Everything was done on paper.
Yeah, right. Everything was on paper. So and then I joined Constellation in 2014 because with the success of a point solution like Hyphen, I felt like an enterprise platform has the ability to profoundly impact home builders, and I saw the direction that Constellation was taking the industry, and I was excited to join. So, Alex.
Excellent.
Yeah, so a little bit different path for me. I was a pure technologist writing code when I came out of college, and did that for quite a while, with some big players in the space. And then I moved into business systems. So I started delivering business systems into companies, ERP, CRM, and I really got focused on CRM. This was, in the 2000s. And in 2007, I started a project with Standard Pacific Homes, which was a large national home builder in the US based out of Irvine. I went in as a consultant to put in a CRM system. And, at the end of 2008, I joined them full time and started running business app them. And then essentially through my career, I stayed in home building for 15 years almost, running IT organizations for some of the large publics, right? Mainly in a CIO role, but different home builders across the industry. And one of the things that I realized as I was doing that was this insatiable need for data and accurate data and stuff like that. So after the last company I was with, which was William Lyon, got acquired by Taylor Morrison, I'd known Chris, our president at Constellation for a while. And I reached out to him and said, hey, how about we do a solution for the entire industry from the data perspective, as opposed to, you know, me going one by one as a CIO into different home builders and doing it each time kind of the same thing. So that's how I ended up in Constellation. I think it was 2020 I joined, and I'm Vice President Data Strategy. I run the data group for Constellation. And yeah, you know, that's kind of my path into home building and into essentially, you know, providing the service back to the home building community.
Well, gentlemen, I mean, those are incredible stories, and I appreciate you sharing them. And Paolo, to your point, I really want to dive into one of those products that we're going to talk about later in the show, which is the Builder Metrix.
Yep.
But, you know, really to start us off is Constellation's claim to fame. You know, the ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning System, as we know today as Buildtopia, has become a standard, as well as other solutions. And, you know, coming from, you know, dealing with CRMs like NextGen, we are seeing that there's a greater need to go to technology and use these systems more. You know, it's kind of cliche to say, hey, we're coming on the backs of COVID and, you know, a different market. But to your point, Paolo, earlier when you said, oh, you know, people would write on a piece of paper, people still do that today. Well, lazy people.
They do.
But, you know, and so it's how do we get that data and just be more efficient where everyone is informed and you're not creating silos. So I know we're going to dive more into that. But Bob, I kind of want to give you the floor and, you know, tell us a little bit about the ERP and what are some challenges or opportunities you're seeing in today's market with this type of solution.
Sure. So, and if you don't mind, if you'll humor me, I'll talk a little bit about kind of the history of what we would refer to as ERP technology in home building. And in my group, I'm primarily focused on large production home builders, publicly traded companies, builders with a requirement for integrated accounting. And so I have two primary ERPs. One is called Newstar and one is called Fast. And then we have, as you mentioned, Buildtopia as another ERP platform that typically sits on top of an accounting package like Microsoft Dynamics, Sage products, even a QuickBooks or things like that. So production home builders, but maybe a little bit smaller. When I came into the space and we talked about ERP technology, everybody in home building just referred to those packages as the back office system or the accounting package, right? Anything outside of the walls of the office of the actual division or the corporate headquarters, they never touched any of that technology. Like that was just something the back office used, right? Mm-hmm. And for years, there's been an effort to expand the use of that technology. And I think there have been a couple of kind of revolutionary moments where it really kind of changed the landscape. And I would say in the mid 2000s, so 2005 or so, and then through the downturn, it forced a lot of companies to actually standardize. And so you saw standardization and the adoption of scheduling and supply chain tools and sales and CRM tools. And so now the two most populous user groups, your construction managers and your sales agents, suddenly had access to technology. And so that was really kind of the first phase of the expansion of the ERP outside of the walls of the office.
And can I add something there quickly, Bob? Just on that.
Go ahead.
So that's kind of when I joined home building, Aaron, you know, in 2008 as this was happening. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, it was not an easy transition for a lot of people, right? I mean, especially in the sales office, everybody did paper reg cards, right? They wrote the customer's name down, everything, and they thought of that as their asset. They thought it belonged to me as the sales agent.
Yep.
And what happened with the downturn was the organization said, no, hang on, as the industry was changing so quickly and people were leaving the industry or being let go, they started to realize the asset of the customer was getting lost, right? And so there was this real mind shift where sales agents were now in a position where they had to put the stuff into a system. They didn't necessarily want to, they want to take it somewhere else. And so there was a bit of a change in the industry in terms of process, in terms of how some of that stuff was done. So I do think Bob's right. You know, there's a bit of an inflection point there in the 2008, 2009 in terms of using a system to capture this information.
Yeah, 100%. And then I think, Constellation's uniquely positioned. We're forever investors in vertical market software. That's our parent company, Constellation Software, goes into vertical markets that are typically underserved and becomes a forever investor. And so, as you mentioned earlier, Aaron, came into the space with a couple of acquisitions in 2004 or so, have done north of 15 acquisitions of technology companies since then, all in the home building space. We've, taken a very professional approach to the continued development of our technology products, and we listen to our customers. And so now if you look at, a typical ERP offering from Constellation, like the Neustar, et cetera, you have the ability to start with raw land and go all the way through the closeout of a community, right? And we can talk a little bit more specifically about some of that functionality, but it leads me, I think, to the second kind of revolution that has occurred in home building, and you mentioned it, Aaron, and that's COVID, right? COVID forced home builders to adopt technology, and in some cases that technology had been around for years, but there was no, and Paolo used the word catalyst to make that happen, and COVID did. Like, we were in our offices in early March, and then nobody could actually sign a physical check the following week to make payroll, right? And so, for instance, at Constellation, all of our builders that were not using electronic fund transfer or EFT or ACH technology, suddenly they're calling us and saying, hey, we can't pay our vendors or our employees. We need you to implement our electronic payment feature, and we need it in 3 days. And we're like, oh, you mean the stuff that we've been telling you to adopt for the last 10 or 15 years? Oh, you need it in 3 days? And so, like, that was the kind of conversation that we were having all over the place. But that was a great example of how all of a sudden home builders realized there are these in technology. And now, if you think about it, the data that historically has been locked in a computer within the walls of the corporate office now manifest themselves on an iPad at 10 o'clock at night in the living room of a potential home buyer, right? Like, visually, like, here's what my house might look like. Here's what my primary bath could be designed to look like. Here's where my kitchen for this model can look like. I can visually get a depiction along with pricing, structural options, finishes, etc. And to think about that today in 2024, almost every builder has this kind of digital footprint expansion on their roadmap. But to think, if we were having this conversation, in January of 2020, it wouldn't necessarily be the same conversation, because that was
Bob,
someday.
I was a CIO during this time in a large home builder at the time, and I'd been so for 10 years plus in different home builders, and all of the technology we had tried for years to get through for the executive team to adopt. Not interested, not interested. It's just money we're spending, all this stuff. COVID hits, and like Bob said, in the matter of 3 weeks, they wanted all of it. All of it. Every single piece that you'd ever talked about that was remote capable, that could schedule our customers, that could do all this stuff. It was a turn on a dime. So from a CIO perspective, it was this really weird time where you'd spent all this historical time trying to get them to adopt technology, and all of a sudden you had to stay in business.
Well, I mean, do you feel the catalyst was due to pain rather than the gain?
It was a realization that, without adopting technology and without having the ability to communicate broadly to our customers, to our trades, in a not being on site or not having them come into the sales office was key to the business. And people realized that very quickly. It happened, when things started going into lockdown and you had to send people home from offices. There was this realization at the executive level: how are we going to talk to our customer? How are we talking to our trade? And so it became, in order for the business to survive, you had to have those pieces of technology in place. So it kind of it pushed people to a point where they had to adopt some of that stuff, which was great. I think, if there's, I don't know that you can say there's a silver lining to an pandemic, but if there was, from a technology standpoint, that would be it. It didn't move the industry really to where it should be if you look at all these other industries, but it certainly moved us forward from where we were.
Yeah, I think it's had the most profound impact on technology adoption in the history of home building. Like I really think that. And the thing is that if you look back and you say to the executives at all of these home building operations and just say, hey, now that we're through the pandemic, let's take away some of this technology, they would never agree to it, right? Home buyers are not going back to driving around aimlessly in the suburbs looking for little model home this way signs on the side of the road, right? Like,
well,
they
one of the
are
metrics,
going to,
go ahead. One of the metrics we used to use was printing driving directions. That was how we measured success on conversions on the website. How many people printed driving directions?
Same.
Can you imagine trying to tell someone today, oh, you have to go to the website and print driving directions to see your product?
Yeah.
So the expectations also from a customer standpoint. So keep in mind, this all happened in the context of everything that was going on with mobile and with internet and all that stuff, right? So the expectation of the consumer was also, I can do everything on my phone. Why can't I, this is the biggest purchase of my life. And you're telling me I have to go and print a piece of paper and then follow a map? It was like, so that kind of started to move it forward as well.
Well, and you're also dealing with a more educated population or audience that's coming to the site or to the property.
Yep.
So you need to have a staff that can not only speak the language, but answer the gaps that haven't been already answered through the material or assets that are already provided.
Yeah. I mean,
and so underlying all of that is, your ERP at the end of the day. I mean, when you think about the business across the enterprise from a home building standpoint, most of that sits on top of your ERP. So the ERP became quite prominent and center stage for a lot of folks.
Yeah, 100%. And now we see it's interesting. The last, it started, and I'll use CRM as an example. CRM was a buzzword that was around for a long, long time. And I think when technology providers went to the industry in the early to mid 2000s and said, hey, what kind of CRM capabilities should we be thinking about integrating into these sales systems and building into these sales systems? To Paolo's point earlier, the response from the building community was, oh, no. I don't need all that fancy stuff. I just need a one-to-one relationship between a potential home buyer and a sales agent. And that's it. 3
Simple.
weeks after they came, let's send them a package. 2 weeks
Yeah.
later, I'm gonna phone them, give them a phone call or whatever it happened to be. And this idea of branding and it was just irrelevant to most home builders. Like they said, you know what, if so and so doesn't buy a house for me today, I don't ever need to talk to them again because they bought a house from a competitor. And once we started to see more diverse marketing people brought in from outside industries, and CRM was a focus. Always a question: what are you using for CRM? They're like, oh, 3x5 cards. So suddenly, I would say, let's just say roughly 8 or 9 years ago, some larger builders started saying, hey, we need a better CRM system. Then the next step was we need that CRM system to actually talk to the ERP application.
Yeah.
And so and it always starts out like if I'll use you, Aaron. If Aaron decides to buy a house from us, send Aaron's contact information into the ERP platform, and then it progresses rapidly from there to I don't want Aaron in my ERP platform if he's not going to buy a house. So for scenario builds, I need to be able to do scenario building in the CRM. So now all of a sudden in the CRM, you need to contemplate the concepts of communities, plans, elevations, base price, standards, options, upgrades, etc., to do a proper scenario build. And so the technology integrations have become relatively sophisticated, and now we're seeing integration requests not only for CRM platforms, but we are seeing them for AP automation platforms, financial forecasting stuff. I know you've
FP&A,
done
yeah.
some stuff with that.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a key point, Bob, that you're making here, and Aaron. The landscape for solutions in home building is somewhat fractured, or it has been, right? So there was the core accounting package, and then you went to a different provider for your scheduling, and you went to maybe a different provider for purchasing and for vertical construction and operations, and then you got Salesforce over here, and so you ended up with this whole array of platforms
Yeah.
that you're using just to get your business done, right? And so as Bob was saying, integration
What's somewhat disconnected too.
yeah, and disconnected, right? So now you have this need for all these systems to talk to each other. So you have to build these IT teams that have to spend most of the time just managing integrations. I mean, when I was running IT for different companies, I had people that were dedicated to just watching certain integrations because they were so key to the business, right? So this idea of moving data around became pretty critical as well, but ultimately what the industry really wants is a single solution for all of this stuff. They don't want all these bits and pieces that they have to bolt together. It's expensive. It's problematic when it doesn't work, all that kind of stuff. So, there's the data side of it, but it's also like, can we be smarter about how we present a solution to the industry?
I agree. And I would say to the caveat, two points actually, spot on the integration, because I think it was 5, maybe 6 years ago, we, in that same vein of Wave, is integrated well with Buildtopia, and we have dedicated to that integration with Constellation.
Yeah.
And a lot of it to the point of you were speaking about kind of an all-in-one, which is great. It's a great goal to go to. And I'll use kind of the, as we're on the same vein of the CRM, the 10,000-pound gorilla, which is HubSpot. Right? That would be kind of the golden child of the all-in-one out-of-the-box solution. But then you realize, okay, this solution is too broad. They do a great job in education. They have a lot of ways, but then you got to spend tens of thousands to adapt it. So I do see the value in having an all-in-one system, but it also has to be an all-in-one system that's catered to that industry. Because if you think, hey, I'm looking for an all-in-one system, I'm going to grab a CRM, a HubSpot. We see this all the time and say, well, I grabbed HubSpot. The average Joe doesn't, the builders, the average builder doesn't know how to use it.
Yeah.
They're driving, they bought a Ferrari and they're driving around like a Honda.
Right.
They have no idea how to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know if we'll get into a discussion about our next version of ERP, but one of the things that we've done there is, we've invited the community, the home building community, to be heavily involved in the design of that, so that it is built essentially by them from the ground up, right? Because we realize, we can develop stuff with the knowledge that we have, but you really need to go to all your different builders and say, okay, so this is how we see this piece works in your ERP. Is that how it works? And across, 10 or 15 builders, there'll be subtle differences, in some cases dramatic, but mostly they're subtle. And you just need to make sure that if you provide a solution into the marketplace that covers a wide array of functions, that you've thought about those subtleties, that the system can adapt to them and manage them. So, so that's one of the things we're doing with our next version, which is, just about to release here. So,
Yeah, Aaron,
Yep.
what Paolo's referencing is we've had a 10+ year project, and that is also, kind of something unique about Constellation is, as forever investors, we have a long-term goal planning that has a time horizon that most other technology companies that are maybe private equity backed, private investors are just not capable of pulling off. Like to say we're gonna write a new ERP from the ground up. We're going to work closely with our home builders, and it's going to take us over 10 years before we can even get to the point where we can show somebody in the market what we've been working on. Like that's a really unique position to be in, and we've been working on it, and it is a very comprehensive product, and it will, go from raw land through obviously the home building stuff. Because of the strength of build to rent, there's also property management capabilities that we're building into it. But we are also aware that many of our builders, because of the feedback that we've been able to get from them, something like CRM, for instance, they're like, by the time you get to the point that you are on par with the functionality that ABC company provides in CRM, they're going to be like 5 years ahead of you. Like, why try and replicate that? So, we're focused on the core home building stuff, the stuff that you said and mentioned, Aaron, that is unique to the industry. That is the stuff that we're addressing. CRM will do standard integrations with CRM packages. Same thing with AP automation. We'll deliver an out-of-the-box AP automation integration with a third party. So those are the things that we're not going to waste our time trying to reinvent something that other industries have taken hold of and essentially developed years and years of functionality that we would never be able to replicate easily.
and actually, that might be a good segue into Builder Metrix. I don't know if you want to.
Actually, you took the words right out of my mouth, because we're kind of going from like the top of the funnel where you have all these systems and integration, and it's really around collecting that data and the organization of data. And then it comes to, and I think what is a huge value proposition that you guys are now offering is Builder Metrix, which is just released here on March 2024, and I have it here to my side of some of the stuff that it goes over. And it's a publication where you're taking these years of data and contributions from your all network. And I mean, you guys have, I'm a subscriber, and I would highly recommend for those that are listening, jump on that list, because you have things from operational sales, project summaries, job cost benchmarks for framing, appliances, drywall, flooring, HVAC. I mean, every single trade, new home sales benchmarks down to regions. As a someone who loves data because this is a gold mine. So I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
so
So what?
let me share
Yeah.
with you a little bit about just the genesis of Builder Metrix.
Yes.
And what you described is a slice of what we do, right? But I'll tell you about the platform itself. So as I mentioned earlier, when I joined Constellation, the discussion I had with Chris was, okay, I've done these data warehouses in different home builders. And honestly, as I look across systems, whether it's JD Edwards or it's Neustar, or whatever they're using from an ERP or their sales solution, 95% of what they're doing is the same stuff. There's a little bit of difference here and there, right? So the notion was, hey, why don't we standardize at least a data model? Let's come up with a standard data model for home building, and then we'll take on the work of mapping all the ERPs into that data model, right? So, and originally before it was Builder Metrix, it was called Homebuilder Common Data Model, right? Because and so if you think of it at a high level, home builders, they have companies, they have divisions, they have projects and communities, they have lots and jobs, and they have plans, elevations, options, all this stuff, right? In some form in a system. So all we did was we said, okay, let's take all those components, we build the hierarchy in a standard format. We'll look at the different ERPs, whether it's JD Edwards or Neustar, and we'll map from those systems into our common standard. And then we can leverage that essentially to gain insights at a builder level and at an industry level, right? Because now we've got a common data format that we can use across the industry. By the way, something that was sorely lacking in our industry. We really don't have a lot of commonality across the industry,
Yeah.
So our thought was, look, we're kind of uniquely positioned for this because we have hundreds of builders on our systems, first of all. We have access into the home building community at a very high level. I can go talk to any of the CIOs and say, hey, I'm doing this. You guys, can we work with you on some of the stuff? And so we did that. We built this common data standard that we use internally, now rebranded as Builder Metrix. We take this data from different ERPs, obviously our own internal ones, we've done the mapping. Then there's JD Edwards and others externally that we map as well. Then we take the data from hundreds of builders and we put it into that data model. So that is Builder Metrix in a nutshell. It's that standardization, regardless of the ERP that you're using or the systems that you're using. We're going to standardize that into a common data format. And then we can provide back to you services and offerings on top of that. Keep in mind, not all builders can afford a data team. Data teams are expensive, right? They're expensive. They're hard to find. I mean, to find good data people, it's hard.
Yeah.
But we said, why don't we do that? Why don't we take on the ownership of the data side of things? We'll clean the data, we'll map the data, and we'll provide it back to you as a builder in the standard format you can use. So that opened up things like standard integrations, right? So when we talk about, okay, you want to use Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever you want to use on a CRM standpoint, we'll build a standard integration against our data model. So if you subscribe to our data model, guess what? You get a connector to that too. So that's one of the value props that we brought into the discussion as well.
Yeah, one important thing, and I think the journey the industry has been on, if Paulo tried this, I think he did try it 20 years ago, it would have been met with a lot of resistance, and there wouldn't be any ability to truly rely on the consistency of the data that's coming out of the ERP platforms, right? Something that I've been harping on for 25 years is ultimately the effective use of your technology applications. And that means creating effective use standards so that ultimately the data that the system generates, not some Excel spreadsheet that gets updated by people manually, but the data that the system generates can be relied upon by the executive team to proactively run the business day to day. And so over the years, along with what we talked about earlier, the changes that occurred in COVID forced a lot of adoption of technology and effective system use. And now the quality of the data that is in these ERP platforms is much, much better than it historically has been. So now Paolo can go in, take this data, create the reporting out of Builder Metrix, and know that it actually is meaningful data. I think, Paolo, your correlation to national statistical data is incredibly high, right?
About 97% to the census data. But I mean,
Excellent.
that's a journey, right? And one of the things that we talk, and like Bob was mentioning, that we talk to our builders a lot about is, look at the best practices. And it's very hard for a builder to go in and say, we're going to standardize divisions, even in a single builder. When we used to go and say, we're going to standardize, oh my God, the divisions would be like furious. No, you don't understand us. We do things a special way.
Yeah. This is how it's always been done, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like we build different. You don't understand.
Yeah.
That's great. You can build different all you want, but when your hands are on the keyboard, you're going to put in the data a specific way so that leadership has the ability to pivot as they need to. And we saw this in the downturn. First of all, this was, a learning that I came across at Standard Pacific Homes, where you needed to be able to make a decision in an afternoon. You didn't have 6 weeks to go pull the data and generate a report. It was literally, I need to know how you're performing in that division by this afternoon, because I need to decide if I'm going to shut it down or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the downturn. And so that was the initial genesis of really this data standardization and stuff. And you can have the discussion with the division. A great example is, schedules. Yes, you may build differently in your division. I'm not saying you have to have exactly the same tasks in your schedule as every other division, but I am saying you have to have the same milestones. What you do between those milestones, I don't care. That's your business. That's how you build. But you need to have a trench. You need to have a frame or a slab and a frame. As a bench, as one of the things.
There's going to be standard project milestones that aren't going to change.
Right, exactly. So you need to have those. So that's what we focused on initially, right? And then, like Bob was saying, it really is, as we talk to customers, one of the key things I learned as I look across data, again, of hundreds of builders, is they may have the same system. They may be using Neustar Enterprise, but how they use it dictates the quality of the data that comes out of it. There's some builders that are incredibly disciplined in terms of how they do it from a data standpoint. And there's some that, once we're on to the next task in the schedule, I don't care about going and closing that last task and finishing it off because I've moved on, right? Well, how does that, when I'm building you a cycle time, if I want to give you insight into your cycle time and how you're doing on certain tasks within your schedule, if you don't close that, if you don't finish it, I don't know. Neither do you.
Well, and you're just, and I completely agree. The users that we have that enter the data, they're going to get more from it on a strategic level.
Yep.
I don't doubt that every builder out there is great at execution, but you're going to get caught with your pants down if you don't have the data to make informed strategic decisions about where you're pointing that execution at.
Yep. And this was very similar to the feeling we had, when we went in with CRM in 2008 and everybody was saying, no, I want my paper reg cards, right? And so what we started doing is putting together reports for the CEO. Forget the division presidents. For the CEO, that showed you reg cards, at a division and project level. And all of a sudden, when the CEO starts asking the division president why he's got no reg cards, you can change things. You start to change things. So you can use the system also to drive some change in the business. Again, I'm not saying you have to be absolutely standardized across your business, across the entire nation. That's really, truly not how you build. How you build in Florida is not how we build in California or in Texas, right? So, but the key point there was, in order for us to be able to make decisions at a business level, the way we input data into our systems has to be consistent, right? And so that's the underpinning of a lot of this stuff. We still find, again, like I said, this is a journey. So as we look across the industry now, and I'm pulling this data and I'm mapping it into a standard format, there's still a lot of work we have to do to clean it up and standardize it, right? And this is one of the key areas. I know we mentioned earlier a little bit about some of the AI stuff that comes into play. This is one of the areas where I think AI helps us a lot. We do machine learning, right? So we did all this manual mapping where we spend a lot of time, like over a year, mapping like cost codes, for example. Then we turned that around and we turned it into a learning set for a machine learning engine, and we pumped it all through, and then we ran it across our other builders, and we found about a 95% success rate in being able to map them without manual intervention. So that's, some of the stuff we're doing from a data standpoint now as well, where not only are we helping you standardize your data, then we can then take some of that data and learning and drive it back through the data set so that we can get to a final answer much quicker.
Well, I know we're kind of dancing around the subject a bit of everyone. I don't think you can pick up a newspaper or open LinkedIn without hearing the word AI. So let's talk about future trends. How do you guys feel about, on the same vein, with all this information and technology, how's AI going to improve or change the game for home builders in the industry?
Yeah, for me, so when I look at it, I think of it more as a technology to get rid of some of the busy work, right? There's still a lot of busy work that happens in home building where we're shuffling stuff around manually. So part of that in the back office, I don't want to say maybe AI, but more the notion of automated processes and things like that can help take that load off of those folks. And so you can repurpose some folks to do other things in the organization. So that's one area. Another area I see it being applied is probably in design optimization, right? So if I've got a piece of land, and folks do this manually now, where they take a piece of land, they figure out what's the best use of the land in terms of lots and how we're going to do that, and then you do a manual plan fit, right? You take the plan and how does it fit on these lots and well, why not have an engine do that, right? Why not from the start, just here's a piece of land, give me my optimal, I want to maximize for gross margin, or I want to maximize for revenue. Give me my optimal use of this land and the optimal use of my plan library against this land, right? So those are some areas that I think you'll see what folks are calling AI be used to really move the industry forward. Bob, did you have any thoughts on?
Yeah.
I got a lot of thoughts about AI. But I'm actually because I don't even know what the actual definition of AI. I mean, there's technology that's been around for dozens of years, like OCR technology, AP automation platforms. Now that's being considered AI, right? All of a sudden, like everybody's claiming, oh, we're AI driven, right? So Aaron, I know you guys do some stuff with AI. So what's your thoughts on it?
I would agree. I think these math and computing tricks have been around for years. Everyone and their mother is slapping AI on top of everything and calling it, which it becomes an umbrella. And I think there's a huge population that doesn't understand what AI is, what machine learning is, what predictive AI is, and what generative AI is. And there's so many variations and so forth. But we're at the tip of the iceberg, because I think what's making it more exciting is the processing and how fast. However, just as we've talked about, I don't see it as a silver bullet. It gets down to probably what's the most non-sexy thing to talk about is organizing your data, which is where we're at. And I think you guys have done for an incredible job. And Paolo, I would agree with you 100%. You need to have a standard format.
Yeah.
If you look at how the transformers and how it's produced in ChatGPT, there's a standardization. We all have to come to a standard language. Data needs to be standardized and organized in order for them to get those gains. So it really, it's a catch-22, because it still relies on the human intervention, and leave it to people to find some way to mess up the data.
So I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but when I graduated college in 1994, my senior project was neural nets and machine learning, right? That was 1994. We were already doing this stuff. The difference between then and now, so those ideas have been around a long time. The difference between then and now is compute and cost, right? Back then, it cost you $2,000 to get 16 megs of RAM. Literally, that's what we had, a machine that we could do this stuff on that had 16 megs of RAM, and cost us $2,000 to get that.
And dedicated rooms for the computers too.
I mean, it was just crazy when you think back to that.
Let
but
alone
now, as you look at compute, we have more compute in our phone than probably all the compute we had back then, right? It's so in terms of the speed of that. But as you get to more of this, the large language models, or at least the large data set training, you need a certain level of compute. You need and it needs to be affordable. So for us now, we can tie into services that will give us that compute power to do the kind of stuff that we want to do on data sets across hundreds of builders. I mean, think about hundreds of builders at a GL level or at a PO line item level. I mean, you're talking about a lot of data, at least for our industry, right? A lot of data that you have to get through and figure out. We couldn't do that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, because it would have to be manual. Somebody would have to spend time on it. Now we have the ability to take some of that data and throw it into an engine and say, hey, these are the things I'm interested in. Here's the data that you're going to learn on, go for it. And then we get stuff back. So we haven't even internally, we haven't yet started on the predictive side of things. You know, we're more right now, we're just looking at what we have in our current data set. But when we get to the predictive side, I'm super excited what that brings, right? I mean, right now we're just telling you what we see, what you've done. But when we start telling you where you're going, that's pretty interesting.
That pendulum between exploratory and that exploiting phase. And that's when we can really see those gains.
Exactly.
Yeah. For me, I think there's two things. One is, and Aaron, you mentioned the word silver bullet. There is an expectation, if you read a lot of articles that are about the industry driven from the industry media, there's this narrative or dialogue occurring that like this is going to be revolutionary, and someday I'm going to sit back and all I got to do is like put in a map and like the whole community builds itself. Like we'll get there. That's going to be an amazing day. But when you're having those conversations, it's easy to take your eye off the low hanging fruit. You know, like for instance, in the ERP, I know every product that goes in every home. I have access to a home buyer portal for those home buyers, right? I have access to every manual for every product that went into that home. Like I can take all of that information, put it into an engine, and allow the home buyer to interact with that data, you know, verbally or, you know, through a chatbot or something, to be able to query, like, what am I supposed to do? It's the fall of the first year I've owned my home. What am I supposed to do maintenance wise? And how do I get replacement knobs for my new GE range or whatever it happens to be, right? These are things that home buyers today don't easily get answers to, and they end up going on Amazon or Google, and they're like, and then they're literally spending minutes or hours.
Well, and it also can save the builder, because you know, warranties and insurance, and they have to go and say, hey, you know,
100%.
what's the insurance? How much do I got to on this? I mean, if you have a database where the customer can say, okay, hey, where can I get this? You just saved countless of hours. Definitely on the project management and finance side, because I know they love those post-project queries.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like you said, like right now, those calls go into the builder's back office saying, hey, I don't know where to get knobs for my range. Can you help me? And like somebody in the builder's back office is going on Google and trying, or they're calling their GE rep, or they're calling their, you know, Viking rep, or whoever it happens to be, saying, how do I do this? Oh, we don't sell those commercially. You know, there are other aftermarket people that do. Go on Amazon, you know, like, and then the home buyer is like $325 for replacement knobs. What? This is insanity. Like these are frustrating real situations for home buyers, and it negatively impacts the customer experience, right? Like they're
the brand itself.
They're associating it with the builder. They're not associating with like the fact that Viking doesn't have easy access to to new burners, or knobs, like they associate it to the builder, right?
And I think Bob, you're absolutely right on this, that as people look to, what are the things that we should expect in home building, not just from an AI perspective, but just technology. It's the incremental stuff that makes the difference in the short run, because there is still work to be done in the industry, just in standardization on certain concepts. Like we're trying to onboard as many builders as we can into our common data model or our Builder Metrix, because that gives us a great starting point for the industry. And by the way, that underlying data dictionary, we're happy to share it with builders because we want them to use it, right? So again, taking something like that and then putting some of this newer technology on top of it to help organize or provide value back to your customer base is really where I think we'll see AI being applied in the short run. I think, none of us know what 10 years down the road is going to look like. Are we going to just be 3D printing homes and nobody's doing anything? I don't know. But in the meantime, let's do the stuff that's meaningful to the business and to the customers, right?
I agree. I think it's a more responsible approach to AI and integrating some of these new tools by taking an approach or an ethos of how can we enhance the workflow and the experience rather than replace.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, gentlemen, I know we're kind of coming here towards the end of our program, and what I always like to offer, and just from your guys' story of how you got into the industry, is what advice would you have for someone that's looking to get into the industry or just got into the industry? I could speak for all of us from what we just talked about. We all came from diverse backgrounds, and
Paolo, you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So from my perspective, because I sit on the technology side of it more than the operations front end building side of it, the home building industry has a tremendous amount of potential in terms of just the things that will happen over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Part of that's because the industry, is still catching up with everyone else in terms of how they use technology. So there's just a tremendous amount of potential and opportunity in home building on the technology side, and the process side. So if I was talking to somebody and said, I want to go into home building, I'd be talking to them about, okay, go in there and help them with process, help them with data, help them with systems, because that's going to be super exciting for the next little while, I think, in home building.
So I refer back to this moment frequently, but I had an opportunity to see the chief medical officer of Lennar Homes speak at a conference a few years ago after COVID had started. And he said something that really stuck with me. And that is, when you look at the history of mankind, the most significant change in the lifespan of humans was the ability to create shelter. And as home builders, that's essentially what we do for people, right? Like what we do is really meaningful. And so I like to remind everybody, and our home builders do on a regular basis, that this industry is important. Like we're providing families a home, not just shelter. And it is a meaningful part of every home buyer's life, right? Like that moment when they get handed the keys. And so what we do matters, and it's incredibly cool to be part of an industry that is so important to people's lives. And so I think it's an incredible industry to be in. The employees that are coming into the industry, to Paolo's point, the technology changes, the technology adoption that's occurring, very cool stuff. And I would just say you couldn't be part of a cooler industry. So
I love it. And gentlemen, if anyone that's listening wants to learn more about Constellation or, join Builder Metrix, where can we direct them towards?
So if you go to our website, constellationhb.com, under products, there's a Builder Metrix section. And if you scroll down on it, you'll see a subscribe for the newsletter that Aaron was talking to earlier. I'd suggest everyone do that. It's just great data that we put out every month on the industry as a whole. And if you want more, there's also, you can request a demo, or you can request for one of us to reach out to you and chat to you as well. The other thing I'd say on our website, there's also a whole bunch of webinars, blog posts and things like that. Go dig through those. There's a ton of folks from the industry who've contributed to that, and just some really good stuff there.
Yeah, and also check out our LinkedIn, Constellation Home Builder Systems presence there. I think that's, we put some good stuff out. All the stuff that Paolo's working on gets put out there as well. So see us on the socials, go to our web page, reach out directly to us. We're happy to help.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I appreciate you being a part of the show, and I hope to have you guys back on so we can look at this and see, were we right in our predictions? As the world change in the next year or so? So thank you.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, Aaron. It was awesome.
And for those that are listening, thank you for joining us, and catch us next time on the Market Pulse presented by Smart Touch. Have a great day.